When Triumph downsized the Speed 400 from 398 cubic centimeters to 349 cubic centimeters, it looked like a win for everyone. A smaller engine meant the bike qualified for the lower GST slab, allowing Triumph to launch it at a lower price while keeping the same design and character. But only a few months later, after two price hikes, the Speed 400 now costs around 2.40 lakh rupees, slightly more than the original 398 cubic centimeters version. So the question isn't whether 6,000 rupees is a big increase. The question is, has the biggest reason to buy the Speed 400 started disappearing? The decision wasn't about making the motorcycle faster or more fuel efficient. It was about pricing. By bringing the engine below the 350 cubic centimeters threshold, Triumph could reduce the ex-showroom price and make the bike more competitive in India's middleweight market. At launch, that strategy worked. The Speed 400 became one of the strongest value-for-money motorcycles in its segment. The first price increase came at the end of May. The second arrived in July. Today, every motorcycle in Triumph's new 350 cubic centimeter lineup has become more expensive, with increases ranging from roughly 3,000 rupees to 10,000 rupees depending on the model. The Speed 400 itself received a second hike of about 6,000 rupees. Here's what makes this story interesting. The entire purpose of downsizing the engine was to make these motorcycles more affordable. But after two price revisions, some models now cost as much as or even more than the larger capacity versions they replaced. That doesn't make the bikes bad. It simply changes the value equation. Triumph hasn't released an official statement explaining these successive price revisions. However, industry reports point to rising raw material costs, manufacturing expenses, and logistics costs as likely reasons behind the increases. Whether those costs continue to rise is something only time will tell. When the Speed 400 launched, buyers were comparing it with motorcycles that offered less equipment for similar money. Now, with a higher price tag, it enters a different conversation. Every price increase gives buyers another reason to compare it with alternatives before making a decision. That's where Triumph's challenge begins. This also makes me think about the upcoming Bonneville 350. It's expected to use the same 349 cubic centimeters platform and compete directly with motorcycles like the Royal Enfield Classic 350. If Triumph launches it at an aggressive price, it could become a huge success. But if the same pattern repeats with future price revisions, that initial value advantage could shrink over time. I'm not saying that will happen. There's no official information suggesting it will. I'm saying it's something worth watching because we've already seen it happen once with this platform. The Speed 400 is still a solid motorcycle. The real question is whether it can continue offering the same value that made it such an easy recommendation on launch day. And that's why the Bonneville 350 launch is going to be so interesting. If you enjoy motorcycle analysis that goes beyond the specifications, subscribe to Gears and Pistons. We'll be covering the Bonneville 350 from launch to ownership, and more importantly, whether it delivers on its promise. Now, I want to hear your opinion. Would you still buy the Speed 400 today, or would you choose something else for the same money?